All right, fantastic.
I think it's like including this one also. I think it's just valuable.
All right, well, hello, everybody. How's it going? How was everyone's fall break? Good. All right, for as long as it was. So just another reminder, we have our Pioneer Park Changemaker event this Saturday, October 23rd. It's from 8 to 12. We meet at the BAC room 116. So if anyone can make that, that'd be fantastic. So just wanted to remind everyone about that. So I want to make sure you sign in real quick, just so we got you. So constitutional law is a very interesting area of law. It's one of my personal favorites. So I figured we had to have some speaker come and talk about it this semester. And freedom of speech, very big issue on college campuses and also, online nowadays. Anyone see that one video at the Multicultural Center? That was like making the rounds the other week. Yeah. So fairly big thing. We figured freedom of speech, important thing to talk about. So hence Professor James Weinstein. So he's a professor at ASU Law School, and he's going to tell us all about his career and about some of the stuff related to First Amendment Constitution. So that's the plan. No lengthy introductions here. So
thank you. Being almost 70 years old, I appreciate everyone put on masks. Thank you. I try not to be too paranoid. Because it's hard to get one's equilibrium. Very hard to know. I figure in terms of actually dying from this, even at my advanced stage, driving down here is probably more dangerous. Still, it's all a cost benefit analysis, isn't it? So I'm really
excuse me again, I gotta admit someone from the radio.
okay. Just like Zoom, huh?
Yep. There we go. That should be good.
So I'm really pleased to come here and talk about my second favorite subject, me. First favorite subject is, my first favorite subject, of course, is the First Amendment. Of course it is. But okay, so Sebastian came up with some very good prompts for me because I've spoken, all over the world, but never to the undergraduates at my own university. So it's very helpful. Thank you. So what interested me in law in the first place was one of the questions. So, well, I should say that at age 5, I wanted to either be a fireman or a brain surgeon. My father's a doctor. He said, "You mean neurosurgeon?" Yes, but I didn't have the skills for either of those. You see these hands? They're made for turning pages. That's about all they do. So, but I'm good at arguing. At least I enjoy arguing. And so I don't know, he said to me, "You should be a lawyer, or you're going to be a lawyer." And not always very nicely did they say that to me. So actually, when I was in high school, I took one of those interest inventories, and it said, lawyer. And also my father's best friend was a very prominent lawyer, later became a judge, federal district judge. And he thought he sort of encouraged me in that way. Now, there were some detours along the way. I'm from LA. I played in my first rock band at 14. And so, of course, I wanted to be a rock star. And when I was 17, I think it was out then that Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones left the band, and I wanted to be his replacement. Again, didn't have the talent. Now my son, who went to Barrett and got a teaching credential and was teaching at Basis, just 2 days ago went out on tour with some band that you probably all know, but I don't. And so, he has the talent, unfortunately. So there was that one, and then I did play in a with my wife, we did play in a blues band, law school blues band called the Blue Laws, which I, you know what Blue Laws are? You look it up. Which I cleverly named. And then there was some other detours. In college, I wanted to be an historian, but the thing about history is that, you know, it was all so theoretical. There's not practical enough. I like theory, but I also like practice. And I always thought that from what I knew of law, at the end of the day, someone's, you know, there's a decision. Might be right, might be wrong, but there's a decision. I kind of liked what I thought would be the combination. And then there's being a creative writer. Said I'm from LA, and screenplay was my senior thesis was a screenplay. My brother actually co-wrote the screenplay to Big Trouble in Little China. Did you know Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell? It's pretty good. He wrote that. So, and I took a couple of creative writing courses with my old English professor. Old because I call him old because he's former, and he was old, like in his 50s, and he was my former teacher. So it's my old English professor, and he did a lot of, besides teaching me Old English, you know, Beowulf and all that, he supervised my creative writing. And I said, so should I go to law school or should I be a creative writer? And he said, go to law school. And I said, why? He said, well, first of all, in my 30 years, I've supervised a lot of writers, and you're pretty good, but you're not the best. And he says, but well, why am I not the best? You know, which I like to argue. Okay, Jim, look, I've been watching your writing now for many years, and you come up to a point where you have to decide between logic and drama. You'll go for logic every time, so go to law school. So I went to law school. And oops.
Oh, no. It's been doing that a little bit. There we go.
Ah, good.
It doesn't detect our motion well enough.
So I went to law school and loved arguing with my fellow students and professors. Loved arguing with professors. I loved law school, except for the exams. I did not love exams, though I did well enough at them to do well in law school. Finally found something I was good at. Those are the problems. I had all these other things. I guess I was pretty good at history, but undergraduate. But you know, but certainly could lead to a career. So you're getting to the point maybe with a lot of lawyers are we can't really do anything else now. Try people who really don't have any other talents, but there's some truth in that. But so I really liked it. I didn't like taking exams, but I did pretty well in law school. So I was the law review, was on the editorial board law review, which and in law school I fell in love with constitutional law. Sort of why? I don't know, because it was important and exciting, and it seemed interesting to me. I'm not quite sure why. I think because of the drama. Oh, see, old thing. I do like drama, and especially free speech. I was known around the law school as Mr. First Amendment, and not always nicely. Oh, there's, everything is a First Amendment issue. Right? I mean, why? Because I like criticizing, arguing, dissenting. When I don't I'm accused of dissenting for, arguing for arguing. I mean, being contrary. I don't think I am. I just, if I really believe something is wrong, I'll speak truth to power or truth to not power. I try. I'm not always right. Usually I'm right, but not always. 3 years ago, I did a symposium on a famous decision by a learned hand who you'll learn about when you go to law school in New York at NYU. And I was invited some of my law school friends. I went to University of Pennsylvania, which is an East Coast school. And so I invited my friends to the symposium at NYU. And at a break, in the men's room at the urinal, and arguing with somebody about something that had been going on at and there was one of my law school classmates was there watching and walk out. He says, Jim, 35 years ago, I'm in the men's room and you're arguing about the First Amendment with someone. Here I am, and what are you doing? You didn't even go to the bathroom without you arguing about the First Amendment. After law school, I clerked for the Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Law clerk, it's different experience for different, and he was a good judge too. You go up to, when you're lawyers and you go up to argue a case in the San Francisco Ninth Circuit, the courthouse is named after him. He was a, brilliant Montana boy. And clerking for him was a really good experience. He would tell us, he would say, now boys, and yes, back then he had almost all males. It was not perfect. Now, boys, the only way you can go wrong with me, he'd say, is to tell me what you think I think. That's not why I'm paying you. Well, actually, he wasn't. I want you to tell me what you think. And that was a good experience, how you interpret. But what do you think we should do in this case based on, not your gut feeling on law, but how would you decide the case? Good experience. While clerking, I was offered an assistant professorship at the University of Iowa. And I very tempted to take it, but I had clerked for the summer at a big law firm in Los Angeles, although Melvin admires. And I had an offer to go back there after my clerkship. But then I had this offer to go to Iowa City to teach law. And so I didn't know what to do. It just so happened that it came up to argue a case was a guy named Tony Amsterdam, who was the smartest person, well, at least had the highest grades by far of anyone that ever went to the University of Pennsylvania Law School. He was a legend. He was coming to argue a death penalty case. And I, after the case, I went to talk to him and I said, so Professor Amsterdam, what should I do? Should I go practice law or should I teach? And he said, well, Jim, you have some doubt, right? Well, then I would go practice law, because he says, I've known too many people who had some doubt, and they've gone into teaching, and they figured they made the wrong choice and either literally or figuratively blew their brains out. To this day, I'd like to know, I should call him up, I think so wide, who literally blew his brains out. But so for that and lots of other reasons, I wanted some practical experience as a lawyer. So I went to practice at the first of my two law firms in LA, and then one of the partners left to form a smaller practice of a big labor law firm called Seifert Shaw. I went with him. And it was really interesting. The highs of practicing law, particularly a big law, firm. I mean, the lows are really low, answering interrogatories and odd, document production. But the highs are really high. I participated in some really great cases. It all comes back to music. See, lawyers, those who can do, those who can't practice law, right? Those who can do, those who can't teach but don't practice law. And so I did a lot of music law. I represented RCA Records in a number of cases. One of my favorite clients. And I got free records for the rest of them. I could probably still get them. And I was on the Oakland Raiders franchise move case. It represented the NFL and trying to block successfully the Oakland Raiders from moving to LA. Served LA right because they moved right out again. But we told them, and then one of my most fascinating cases was representing the hops industry. You know what hops, that stuff that they put in beer to flavor beer. Representing that shows how old I am. During the Reagan administration, wanted to do away with a marketing order, sort of a monopolistic practice, which they kept prices up of the hop industry. Roosevelt era marketing order wanted to do away with it. And I represented the hops industry. So they're great cases, even for an associate, particularly as I became more senior associate. I always thought that the partner's confidence in me directly with how busy they were. And but then it came time to buy into the partnership, and I would have been stuck in called up Iowa, and they said they still wanted me. And they said, well, yes, but you're con law, you'd have to teach him. But at that time I got my former con law professor, named Paul Bender, who still teaches here. He's 88 years old, went to high school with Justice Ginsburg. She wasn't Justice Ginsburg there. She was Ruth Bader and had thrown the baton. He came to visit me, and when I was actually at my first law firm, and said, if I were to become a dean somewhere, would you think of coming? Sure. So it's about time. I called him up. I said, you still want me? He said, yeah. So I reviewed here, and I got the job, and I think it was 1986, and at first I taught a bunch of different courses: civil procedure, federal courts, legal history. See how it comes back? My cake and eat it too. Matter of fact, my first big article, my tenure piece, wasn't on free speech or constitutional law, some sort. It was history of personal jurisdiction. What's personal jurisdiction? You'll find out soon enough in your civil procedure class. So it was a history, going way back into, Europe and then early America. So I got to do history while I was litigating all sorts of First Amendment cases for the ACLU. And it's when the ACLU believed in free speech. Well, they still do, not purely. And so, and then for the last 10 years or so, though, I taught mainly constitutional law, and most recently, almost exclusively free speech, except for a seminar I do on the Supreme Court. And an undergraduate course. This is my advertising. An undergraduate course I'm going to do next spring. You guys know about that? On free speech on campus. So I'm going to teach that. And so now, what else was I? So Sebastian said ways that undergrads might want to prepare for law school, or what qualities do you find leads to be a successful law student?
And we're doing it again.
No, this is cute. This is. I've often told that I leave my students in the dark, but so literally. Okay. So what do you need, in my humble opinion, which, as I said, is usually right, to be a good law student? You'd be a good writer, and to be a good lawyer too. Good writer, good at textual analysis, particularly close textual analysis, and good at rigorous thinking as opposed to sloppy thinking. or maybe too emotionally laden. Not that emotions aren't a good place to start. Your intuitions aren't a good place to start with how you, but you've got to be rigorous in your thinking. Okay? Good law student, good lawyer. In my humble opinion, it's an advantage to be all three of those things. Good writer, good at textual, teasing apart text, understanding text, creating ambiguities in text, resolving ambiguities in text, noticing ambiguities in text, or how to resolve ambiguities by close textual analysis. So what courses would lead to that? Well, anything, first of all, that requires you to write papers, though not for just some general big course for the professor, but where you get some good feedback and someone can really work with you. Not so much on the grammar and all that. It's too late if you don't. But if you haven't learned how to write a grammatical sentence and still comma splicing and stuff like that, still saying irregardless, still saying between you and I, it's too late. But in terms of cogent exposition, as an undergraduate, it can help to be in a course that will where you get good feedback. So, and then textual analysis, where do you get that? Literature, poetry, or like my son who teaches high school, as he did until 3 days ago, even analysis of songs. So I did something, I had him, we worked on something for his class, how you analyze actually an old ballad to textual analysis. And then, so, a literature class, best for that. And then there's rigorous thinking. Now that you can get in almost any STEM subject, right? Or analytical philosophy, something like that. Not all philosophy, mind you, not Foucaultian continental philosophy, but good analytic philosophy. So, and not formal logic. It's not formal logic, isn't it? I mean, to sort of know, your modus ponens and all that stuff, but that's way overrated. Formal logic. I mean, just good, rigorous thinking. Any STEM subject, or certain types of humanities. So, the ideal major is, a literature major with a minor in physics, or the other way around, physics major and a minor in, but look, there's all sorts of combinations. That would be my advice for how to figure out. All right, let's see, I think I'll just sit up here. You can ask me questions.
All right, sound good.
So throughout your life, when or what do you think signaled to you that you were done practicing law and that you'd prefer? I know you were talking about how you reached out to the professor, but what necessarily exhausted you?
In practicing?
Yeah.
Well, I had always thought that I would go back to, I always thought I was just visiting the law firm. In fact, I would say as much. Oh, don't say that. Don't think you're, not in this for the law. I'm not, and in terms of if I did want to become a partner, although the second firm did offer me a partnership, but in terms of maximizing how to become a partner, you probably don't want to say I'm just here visiting, because back in those days, they put a lot of investment in you. So they wouldn't bill us out for very much, $65 an hour or something, and they would train us. They would really train us. I'm talking about have someone, because legal writing is different from the kind of writing you do in literature class or almost anywhere else. And so partners would, go over, when they were too busy, line by line, how to write, really train you. They can't do that so much because of the economics. So but I always knew I wanted to get back into academics. Okay, that said, I saw that, at least big firm law wasn't for me. The highs were awfully high, but I didn't have the skill set, I don't think, to be enormously, maybe I would have been, I don't know, enormously successful practicing lawyer. I mean, a lot of times the people would say to me, can it take me too long to do this stuff? I get caught up in what was interesting. You come on, Jim, this isn't an academic exercise. Get that brief done. And I was sort of more interested in the ideas, and I don't know. I mean, would have I been okay at it? Probably. Or maybe I would have found I was thinking because we were going to partnership with a well-connected LA friend of mine, small practice. But I just thought I was sort of had an academic bent, and I wasn't, would have been, if I had been, like enormously successful, particularly in my first firm, which is a very, very prestigious firm. It was run by someone who was became Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, and it just if I would have been, come on, you got to stay. My second firm, they did sort of say, don't go, but I knew I wasn't the greatest practitioner. I think I just thought my talents lay in academics. So, it's a long-winded academic answer to your question. Other thoughts? Yeah.
So given your expertise in obviously the First Amendment, is there any way you've noticed that the discourse around the First Amendment has changed throughout the years? Have students thought about it differently? Have lawyers thought about it differently? And especially you mentioned like the ACLU getting less and less like supremely dedicated to it. So what are some of the different trends you've noticed in regards to that specific area of law?
Oh, wow. I could write many an article about that. There has been clearly less enthusiasm for the classic free speech, defending the speech that we hate. I despise what you've said, but will defend to the death, that kind of attitude. When I was, before I went to law school, my grandfather's, I used to argue with my grandfather's friend who was lawyer for the village of Skokie when the American Nazis wanted to march there. The ACLU, a Jewish lawyer representing the Nazis, the ACLU defended the right of Nazis to march in Skokie. Very controversial even then. The ACLU lost 1/3 of its membership, but they didn't, up until recently, would defend called hate speech like that. But I think there's less enthusiasm even at that level. There's still some at the ACLU. They're still a good free speech organization. But I noticed that the sort of the younger generation, does not tend to embrace free speech. Maybe I disagree, but there can be good arguments. I spent a lot of my time debating, particularly with people from other democracies, whether hate speech, racist speech, anti-Semitic speech, anti-Muslim speech, that kind of stuff should be protected, and I generally think it should be. But there are arguments on the other side, and now, for whatever reason, there's a lot of bad arguments that I see around campus for not. Just sort of this, what we would call the woke notion of attitude towards things. it's plenty woke, and all younger generation are to some extent woke. That's their job, is to be more socially concerned than their parents. But this seems to have gone to an extreme, and it's also on college campuses tend to be bought into by people who should know better. In some sense, the battles on campus today are on some deep level, and I say deep levels, between conservatives and liberals on the one hand versus illiberals on the other hand. But the liberals don't tend to speak up, maybe out of fear. Maybe you don't, or not, just not being popular, or and also there seems to be an age difference that even among liberals, people who really are in some sense dedicated to liberal propositions such as free speech, due process, that kind of thing. It tends to be the older of us tend to be more enthusiastic about free speech, and even people who really are on the liberal rather than illiberal side of the line. And what's the illiberal side of the line? Marxist, vulgar Marxist, don't even know where it comes from, kind of the worst kind of the woke mentality. It's just, so, there's always been on campuses this Marxist, illiberal Marxist view. I remember arguing back in the 1970s when I was in college with Marxists about wanting to ban books from the bookstore, because it had, stuff that could be considered racist. It wasn't even hardcore racism. It just could be interpreted that way. And I remember arguing with Marxists about that. But the Marxists of those days were well written, generally well read, and had a theory. There seems to be, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old. There seems to be, in today's world, kind of an almost mindless opposition, and not very well thought out opposition to free speech. As I said, there are good arguments for stopping hate speech. They haven't persuaded me, but there are good arguments. But but I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair. You tell me if I'm being unfair. And so that's affected so partly it's generational when it comes to free speech. So as younger people get into the ACLU, the ACLU in Marxism is a very interesting organization. They banned communists from being members of their organization because, as did some of the labor unions, because they didn't want to be infected. Liberals did not want to be infected by Marxists. And so I don't think the ACLU is being infected by Marxism, but it's generational in a part. These are still liberals who are, the ACLU are still liberals, and they took the hate speech case in the Charlottesville. Bad result, someone got killed, and there was a lot of problems with that. So it's partly generational, and on campus it's generational and the continuing anti-liberal Marxist influence. Any other questions? Or maybe I'm just getting old. I didn't, yes.
I guess hearing you talk about the evolving culture on college campuses, I was wondering if there's anything you learned in your time in academia that you wouldn't have learned as a practicing lawyer.
Learned about culture?
Or I guess about law or anything that you thought was interesting that you realized you wouldn't have been exposed to or learned about when you were practicing.
That's a great question. What did I think I've learned a lot of things about law as an academic that I couldn't as a practicing lawyer, because I really had the time to study it. That was the kind of thing that, the people, come on, Jim, I really could think deeply about it. Or just let my mind, like when you're in a dictionary, you see a word and you keep going to another word, when we used to have these actual book type things. I could go sort of like some kind of butterfly. Oh, that's interesting. And just, oh, I'm really sort of interested in that and hop into areas. I mean, I told you I did my tenure piece on, personal jurisdiction. I did plenty of personal jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction means when a court asserts jurisdiction over you, when can they? So you're sued in a tort for an automobile accident out there on Apache and Mill or something. And can someone sue you in New York for that accident? No, I don't think so, because that court doesn't have jurisdiction over that accident over you, unless of course you're a citizen of it's complicated. That's what personal jurisdiction is. And I, did those kinds of cases all the time. But when I started writing and thinking about it, I got into the history and went back to, people writing about that in the Netherlands, which was another confederation, and then it was borrowed in the early United States when we were a confederation. And so, I got that kind of, just because I had the time to really go into depth and my mind wandered. Anybody here want to be an academic, a legal academic?
After I practice, probably.
No one else? Maybe, yeah. So I'll tell you a story about that. I don't know how much time we have. So I was here teaching 3-4 years, making $42,000 a year, early 1990s. And the partner at my first law firm, who I did the Oakland Raiders franchise move case with, and then he went on to represent Exxon in the Exxon Valdez case. Do you ever hear about that? I mean, and he came to visit me. We're still friends. I'm, matter of fact, arguing with him right now over email. He's long retired, but about recent voting rights case. He came to visit me. He said, "Hey, Jim, you're riding bikes on the canal." And he said, "Do you want to know how much your class is making at Melvin and Myers now?" And I said, "No, I really don't." He said, "You guys just hit the $1 million mark. The average partner of yours makes $1 million a year. And here I'm making 42.5. And I go, Pat, I wouldn't trade that." And I said, and he goes, "Yeah, I don't blame you." And so that's one thing you should know, that legal academics don't make a lot of money, and practicing lawyers can. So that's a reality. You can get lucky like me. I'm married to a doctor, so that works out pretty well. And any other questions about practicing law? And I've done a lot of practicing after leaving, doing pro bono cases. Yeah.
This kind of strives away from practicing law, but from your experience in your undergrad, your law degree, and now being a professor, what is some of the best advice you can give to some undergrad students trying to get to law school?
Well, the advice I gave is take case courses that involve a lot of writing, textual analysis, and rigorous thinking. Other people, other advice, take political science. I never took political science. I sort of regret it. I'm sort of interested in political science. I don't know, it's to help you in law school. It's interesting. Maybe it will. Other people say take some law courses. I never took a undergraduate law course. I don't think we were sort of advised not to by the law schools. I'd like, all you're going to do is learn stuff we're going to have to unlearn you. You're just going to, because first year law school, at least traditionally, was like a rite of passage. Like I wrote a paper, my third year of law school, comparing first year law school to like a African initiation ritual, or a traditional it's really rigorous. It sort of strips away your old life so they can pour the new life, new way of thinking into you. So, does taking law courses get in the way of that as undergraduates? I don't know, never took one, so I don't know. Someone did say, you might want to take an undergraduate law course just to see if you like what's sort of called law. So you might get the wrong idea about that as well. But that would be my advice for those two things. Learn, do a lot of writing, do close textual analysis, and do courses that really require rigorous thinking. Now, mistake that I did make, so it's good. I almost never took, there were exams in the courses that I took, but they were usually the kind of, there was usually, courses that also had papers. And the exams were very rigorous in terms of time. So I remember in my old English class or something, old English and, in translation. And I remember, it was the final and it was the last, the professors would just do it. And it wasn't all very formal and proctored or anything. The professor would just hand out the exam and it would be, your class, that last class. And then you would say, okay, all right, class is over, turn in the exams and keep writing, come on. And I'd keep running because I was slow and I remember he said, Jim, I'm getting hungry, hurry up, hurry up with that. Can I have 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Law school in that way. It's very, very, it's an honor for a violation if you don't put down your pen or stop typing. They tell you to stop typing. And I had trouble at first because I didn't take enough real serious timed exams. And so I didn't, finish on the first year a couple of exams. And so it's amazing that I, made the law review with not finishing, the third question or something. So do learn how to take exams on a serious time limits. Also, there's a lot of reading in law school. You have, you have 4 or 5 courses, or you have, I think, 4 substantive courses in a legal writing course. And each class will, meet 2 or 3 times a week, and there'll be like 30. It's supposed to be 20 to 30 pages of reading a night for each class, but none of us abide by that, and we're, sometimes give you 40 or 50. So there's a lot of reading. So learn how to, deal with lots of reading. You really can't, you should. In my Supreme Court seminar, I give them one case from the Supreme Court and say, read it completely and critically and, and carefully. You can't do that with your typical law school course. You can't do it carefully or even completely sometimes. So learning how to deal with big masses of reading is, but you'll learn when you have it. I used to tell my first years that, so in terms of difficulty, if 10 is astrophysics and 1 is kindergarten, the concepts that we have in law is about 4. But you've got so much of it. And also, that's not bad training because when you get to be a practicing lawyer, you get hit with this massive amount. You can get hit with this massive amount of reading to go through and have to, then take a deposition or file motions.
Yeah, I think there might be a question or 2 on Zoom if you can see it.
Oh, yeah, I remember Zoom. Hello, who am I talking to? Where is
You see the chat?
the chat?
Oh, no, it's just the participants. Sorry, can I get in here?
Sure.
I'll just go ahead and read the questions in the chat. Okay, so DJ wants to know, do you think Facebook and Twitter and other social media spaces have the right to censor speech on their platforms?
Yes, they have the right. They certainly, the First Amendment does not control, does not restrict Facebook, social media is not limited by the First Amendment. The First Amendment only applies to government restrictions. So private entities, even big ones like powerful ones like Facebook, and all the others, any private organization, if it's private, is not bound by the First Amendment. Now, they might be bound by law that they mainly so far what they've been given as advantages that the section, I should remember the number 230, I think, of the Communications Decency Act gives them immunity from lawsuits. So Congress can take away this immunity, and Congress probably could maybe tell them that they can't deplatform or they have to get rid of disinformation. They could try and regulate them, but that might be itself a violation of the First Amendment. And we're going to find out. It would just be like telling a newspaper. The newspapers are regulated by law to, libel. So but no, there is no First Amendment right against these private organizations. Question. Yes, was there another?
No, that was the only one on Zoom, I think. Did another one come up?
No.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask, so if you had to pick another area of constitutional law to specialize in other than freedom of speech, other than the First Amendment, which one would you go with?
Great question. I would probably go with what's called substantive due process, which is, I would go with the liberty questions coming up, like questions like abortion. It's the protection of fundamental liberties would be one of my favorite areas of constitutional law. And then after that, probably equal protection kind of questions, maybe race-based, race and other so-called suspect classification, other types of discrimination that the law, Constitution, it disfavors.
So you said you have your students, sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, Gabby, you can go.
So you said you have your students every year, like focus on one Supreme Court case and just go through it thoroughly and whatnot. Is there any Supreme Court case you think that we benefit from actually going through and studying more that's not like very well known?
Well, what I do is each session, they
Yeah.
have a case from the previous term. To really read in full, you might not know about that you could read in full, it would be informative. Well, there's some, what I'm arguing with my former boss about is this Brnovich versus Democratic National Committee a voting rights case out of Arizona. That's really interesting, and you see the conservative liberal split and statutory interpretation with constitutional overtones. Case I'm teaching next time is Bostic versus
Bacon County?
Clayton County. And that's really interesting because you have the argument about textualism and you have Gorsuch disagreeing with Kavanaugh and then also Alito about, who's really following Justice Scalia's view of textualism.
Yeah, we went over that in my constitutional philosophy class. I thought Gorsuch's opinion was really interesting.
Is that, who teaches that?
Demarneff. It's an undergraduate course.
Well, Peter and I have taught together a lot. He's coming to my class on Monday.
Oh, great. He wrote me a letter of rec for law school, actually. Okay.
Yeah, he's a very bright guy. So that'll be worth reading in full, except you can ignore Justice Alito's forest destroying appendix, which is so. Any other questions?
You had one, didn't you?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a very complicated question, so it's kind of hard to be answered in 9 minutes, I assume. But what would you say is like the biggest defense for free speech besides like just like the concept of like having a free market of ideas?
Well, I have defended free speech as being essential to democracy. I just wrote a chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Freedom of Expression on the democracy as the basis. And this is what I've been doing really for the last 15 years, is been writing, saying the true core of free speech in any democratic society is democracy. Contending theory, so that should be, I think, fairly obvious. Can you really have democracy without free speech? I don't think you can. Control our elected officials between elections through public opinion. They follow public opinion, and if we can't add to public opinion, I don't know how we have democracy. Even deeper than that, this is a theory that you know who Ronald Dworkin is. You probably know, and this is sort of a variation.
Yeah, I read him too in that same class.
My sort of contribution a lot. I mean, it's really a variation of him. It is one of the really hard questions in law. It goes all the way back to when there was law, is where does the majority get off telling dissenters that they have to do something? Where does the majority get the right to make a law and coercively enforce it upon reasonable dissenters? All right, look, in any society, you can enforce laws against, murder, arson, but something where people can reasonably disagree about how much tax we should pay. Even, what should be the scope of the civil rights laws for how much should public accommodation laws protect LGBT, those kind of things where people can reasonably disagree. Where does the majority get off passing a law and saying you have to get in line or we'll throw you in jail? Well, there might not be any good answer to that at all. And there's a group of people called the philosophical anarchists who think there is none. But the best that can be done is democracy. We all have our say. You've had your say by voting, by trying to persuade others to oppose the law. And then if you lose, well, then there's more reason to be told that you've got to fall in line, having had your say. Put the other way, if you aren't allowed to have your opposition, to a law or a policy with which you can reasonably disagree, I mean, even, I don't know how far you would accept reasonable disagreement, but whatever that is, then if you haven't had your say because you couldn't vote for people who would vote on it, or you couldn't speak out against it, then it's a real moral problem for the government to use coercion against you. That, I think, is the real basis for free speech. That is called, we call that the constitutive reason for democracy, argument for democracy. And then there's the instrumental reason for democracy, that just for it to function, to know, what legislatures to know what the people want, they've got to be able to speak up. So we also, for us to make wise voting decisions, we have to know what the arguments are. So now, those are the arguments from democracy, which I think are the real core of free speech. Another popular theory is the marketplace of ideas. This comes from, I just did a conference on this, on Justice Holmes's famous dissent in Abrams versus United States, where, the free trade doesn't use marketplace of ideas. He talks about free trade of ideas, and I think he says about marketplace, but it's so this we know the marketplace of ideas. It will find truth if all these ideas are allowed to compete. We'll find truth, political, social, scientific. That's really hard. Out in public discourse, why do we defend in America the right of people out in public discourse? I'm not talking about universities or courtrooms, or talking about out there in the real world, in the parks and on social media, or on your pamphlets that you can, in this country, pretty much say anything you want. And even on social media, the government ain't going to punish you. They can't punish you for even the worst disinformation. They can't punish you. The platforms may throw you off, but if you deny the Holocaust or say that vaccines will make you grow horns, the government can't punish you for that under our First Amendment. And why? Is that really a way to find truth? I don't think so. It's a really lousy way, the food fight of public discourse, to find truth. So, and then there's autonomy, it's just my sort of expressive right. So those are the different things, but I think the strongest argument for free speech is democracy. And you can't have democracy without free speech, and it's the best justification for government using force to make you fall in line with policies in which you can disagree. Okay? My sermon endeth here. And is that...
Yep, we're just about out of time here. So if that doesn't work, but yes, it is 7.
The lights will go off pretty soon. I'll take, I'll argue, I'll talk.
Well, it's 7, so if you guys want to start heading out, feel free. Thanks again, Professor.
Some of you, that's all of you. Our last is now very good.
Yep, it's doing pretty good. So I got accepted the other week. So I got accepted for Virginia, Georgetown this morning. So
Well, Georgetown's a better school.
So we'll see how it goes. We'll have to wait on this stuff. So I got waitlisted at Virginia and Cornell. So I don't know how long I want to play the waitlist game for. So
Well, good luck. It'd be great to have you in the
So
Thank you for.
I emailed you the parking thing if you need it. I don't know if you should. There's like a parking ability. I don't really needed to use it.
Actually, I have a parking. which
There you go.
your last email, I basically agree that, I don't know what that is.
Neither do I. I've never heard of your
Find out.
do one, but I'm sure it's nice.
The free speech issue.
Yeah. Understand is everybody, but I don't.
Yeah, it's, say is that they analyze it. Analyzing this stuff, try and keep not that you can't have moral, but like these people are still analyzing something about what's why.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in, from side and see your function.
Yeah.
Just the provoke.
Obnoxious and kind of ridiculous. Kind of
Yeah, personally, because like you, they're in the environment here where you have these, I think, really flagrant violations of free speech all the time.
Yep.
Horrible attitude.
Pretty bad.
That I'm more sympathetic.
Yeah.
They're both obnoxious. I mean, if it's true, if that guy was looking for a.
Yeah, which I assume, because like his friend had the like Biden sucks t-shirt on too, and it's like that feels a bit too coordinated to be.
What did that say? Biden?
I don't know, it's like Biden sucks or something like that. Or I didn't vote for Biden.
Yeah, I mean, they're obnoxious in different ways.
Yeah,
One, is that,
I forgot I needed to shut off the recording over here.
oh,
So
have I just been recorded?
that's, yeah, but I'll probably edit this out anyway, because I was supposed to end it once
I
the,
guess I don't mind.